Welcome, everyone. I'm Devin Patrick Hughes, music director with the Arapahoe Philharmonic. We're really excited to go live tonight for our weekly MusicConnects series. And tonight I am incredibly excited and honored to mix it up a little bit from the standard performances and interviews that you've been seeing. I am joined by my cat and my wife, Molly Kittle, who is an Alexander technique practitioner. And so you might ask, what is that? And Molly will answer that in a little bit. But we're also joined by three fabulous musicians in the orchestra: Brock Chambers, bass player Daniel Nestor, our principal bassoon, and Tony Zader, our principal trumpet. So without further ado, take it away, Molly.
Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be here, and thank you to Brock, Daniel, and Tony, and Devin, and our cat for joining us. I just want to say to start that I know this is a concert series, so isn't it funny that here I am presenting an Alexander technique lesson of sorts in a concert series. But this is what I can offer, and I think that if you're open and interested, that you can really get something out of this, both as a musician, but also as a listener and a lover of music. My background is actually in music. I am a singer. I come from a family of singers, and I was first exposed to the Alexander work in my my undergrad and graduate music studies. And the work really caught my attention. I really felt a sense of freedom, of transformation, of empowerment, and maybe even a sense of kind of deepening into myself and into my artistry. And it really was so valuable in my life that I wanted to be able to offer it to others. And so I actually work a lot with musicians, and since obviously that is my niche, so to speak. And so I'm happy to present this a little short phrase of a glimpse of this type of work to you all. And I also want to say that as a listener, even if you're not a musician, that you might be able to get something out of this as well, because this work is basically for anyone. I want to talk also a little bit about this concept of what the work is and the concept of freedom. Alexander work offered me this quality of freedom and is often associated with becoming free of pain and discomfort, right? So that would mean there is a kind of biomechanical usefulness to this work based on how we're patterned structurally, right? It's also combined with this sort of meditative element of whole self-awareness, right? And these I like to consider are human superpowers. There's something that we all have. Anyone who has a body can do and participate with. Alexander technique is also a psychophysical study. So it really examines how we think and how that affects how we move, which is again our body patterning, and then how we act, how we then go into a craft or movement. So as I'm sure you've heard a lot about, just, from yoga and all kinds of stuff that people do, that you can't really separate the mind from the body, right? So we're going to look today a little bit at how having an idea, even just about our bodies, can actually change how we move and can give us access to this quality of freedom. And freedom is something that we all desire, right? It's an important thing that we can offer ourselves, especially right now in today's world. So without further ado, I'd love to propose a question to our group here. Why do you think it is, and we'll just use this to kind of dive into this little class that we have together, why do you think it is that we go to a live performance? And any one of you can share an answer to this.
Okay, I'll start. There's a certain energy at a live performance that is unmatched from a recording. energy that you feel from the performers, and energy that the performers then feel back from the audience. And so there's a conversation going on besides the music that's you can't really put your finger on, but it's addictive.
Yeah, totally. It's an exchange of energy. I love that. I love that it's this idea of it being a conversation. Cool. Thanks, Tony. Any other thoughts? Anyone else?
Say it's a sound experience you can't get at home.
Yeah. And why do you think that is? Like, what is it about being live that you think it makes a difference?
There's just nothing between you and the performers and their instruments.
Mm-hmm.
So you get to hear what their instruments actually sound like, not what it's, say through a video call.
Right. Any other thoughts, Daniel or Devin?
Yeah, I think it's about, I don't think it's not about what they said, but I think there is also an element of connection, of having a shared experience with people, with a lot of people that are different, and makes that experience more palpable, more real, I guess, than having experience by yourself in your room.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's about sharing. It's about connecting with a lot of people, and it's about the vibrations and the energies that the music creates in your spirit.
Yes, absolutely. And I would even argue to say that a live performance online can actually offer, it's not exactly the same, can it offer a taste of that? Because there's a moment that as a viewer and as a performer, we're sharing something in that moment, even if it's a little pixelated, right? And the sound isn't exactly the same as it is in person. Now, the reason I bring this up is because I think that when we listen to music and when we play music, we go to a performance to be moved or changed in some way, right? And there's no agenda necessarily in that, right? We can't really predict how the music will move us in any given moment, right? The same is true for this type of work with Alexander, is that if you join me in this experience where we're just going to co-experiment together, then you may be changed in some way. And you don't have to figure out how that should be. And you don't have to also think, well, I have a bad elbow, so that just means that this is going to be a limitation, right? That we can really be moved in ways that link into our innate blueprint, or the intelligence of ourself, the intelligence of our body and our nervous system. We don't actually have to figure that out, but we use little tools to be able to create access points for this brilliance that is literally within our design as human beings. So to start off, which one of you, Brock, Daniel, or Tony, would like to go first with just sort of offering, being a guinea pig, I guess, for us? So just raise your hand and we can just see who wants to dive in.
Yeah.
Daniel, okay, awesome. So
Sure,
Daniel,
why not?
yeah. Like I said, we're co-exploring, right? So thank you for being our first guinea pig. Tell us what you play, Daniel, first of all, so all of us here and on the live stream know a little about you.
I play the bassoon.
Awesome. Okay. And is there anything, Daniel, that you would like to work on today, or that there's a little something that you want more of in your playing? It can be a quality or anything.
Sure. I think there's something that I would love to work on in my playing that also will sort of potentially at least transcend to just the regular life of quarantine, which is how to deal with sitting for hours on end, both playing and typing or programming or working on the computer, Zoom meetings. It leads to a lot of time of practice, of sitting, both practicing and not practicing, but the sitting stays the same, maybe. And so I've noticed that I'm feeling a lot more than I used to. I'm feeling my lower back, and I'm feeling my shoulders.
Yes. Wow. Is this familiar for anyone else? I know
Definitely.
it's certainly familiar for me. Great, Daniel. Let's start with that, and we can all do this together. And then I'd love to experiment with how this affects your playing, and maybe you could share a little bit with all of us in terms of playing a little something. But let's begin with a little exploration in seated, and so that we all can do together. So let's start with. I know Brock, you might be standing because you have the instrument there.
I have a stool too, so
The stool, perfect. Let's start with just identifying our sits bones, our sitting bones. So take one hand and place it under one side of your base of your torso, right, which is where you're sitting. And you're going to feel or kind of look to feel one of the bones that's under there, right, one of your sits bones. And it's going to be kind of curved. We won't keep our hands here very long because obviously our fingers will lose circulation. But go ahead and roll around a little on that sitting bone. It's nice and curved so that you can really feel the shape of that bone. Yeah. And once you find the spot where you feel like the bone is the most intense on your fingers, like it's kind of smashing your fingers into the seat, go ahead and take out your hand and notice the sitting bone resting into the chair or the surface upon which you're sitting. And just see if you kind of have a better or clearer picture of it simply because you feel it a little bit more, or you're sensing it a little bit more. And let's do that with the other side. I take my opposite hand and I'm going to put it under my other sitting bone. And again, feeling the shape, the sort of curvature of the bone. And I allow myself to rock kind of over my fingertips. So I'm kind of really allowing the different surface of that bone to contact my hand, maybe different levels of pressure. And once I feel that I find that most pointed spot of the bone into my fingers, I take my hand out and I let my sitting bones really rest into the surface beneath me. Now, the cool thing about sitting bones is that they are curved. I actually have a little prop here. I have this skeleton friend, and let me close this now. Okay, so we have our sitting bones down here, sits bones at the base of the pelvis. And you can see that this is where we were touching with our fingers. And they are curved like little rockers. And they come toward our center, right? They come at the front of our pelvis, toward the pubic symphysis, toward our center. So if we all are able to cup our hands like so, and slightly angle your fingertips toward each other, and then rock forward while you're mirroring this with your hands. So I'm rocking over those sitting bones and letting my hands kind of rock forward as if they were the rockers, and rock back. So really rocking forward and back, really recognizing those sitting bones as your low rockers of your torso. And Daniel, I'll start with you since we're working with you specifically. What are you noticing in this little process of identifying your rockers?
I'm noticing that by doing this, by thinking about it, some pressure is taken off of my lower back.
Oh, that's
I'm also noticing that I'm not really using the back of the chair now as I did, 2 minutes ago.
Okay. So you feel more kind of over your sitting bones and less back against the back surface of the chair. And something about the lower back having a little more slack, perhaps, in some way? A little less tension, compression?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so this is just an example of, again, this psychophysical relationship, right? We come into noticing something that's true about our anatomy, that when we're sitting for a long period of time, we're not really thinking about our body. right? And then we're not really moving, and then we can end up being a little bit sore. Now, does this mean we have to always be micromanaging, thinking about our body? No, but it means that when we start to feel that discomfort, that pressure, oh, my back hurts from sitting for so long, this is where we use this as a tool, right? So we start to feel like, oh yeah, I have these rockers available to me. Now, Daniel, since you have a back to your chair, I'm actually sitting on a medicine ball, so I'm kind of rolling around here. There's no back behind me, right? Because you have a chair, what if you were to walk your sitting bones back to where your behind, your back tissue, lowest tissue, is actually wedged toward the back of the chair, but you're still feeling those sitting bones underneath you. And it's almost like you're nuzzling your tail, we could say, the back of your pelvis into that back of your chair. So you might be folded forward just a little bit just to kind of wedge it back in there. Now, maintaining just a little sense of those rockers underneath, allow your spine kind of rolling your low back and your spine up against the back of the chair so that you're kind of resting back, but also having that sense of sitting bones at the same time. Great. And what do you notice with that? Is that clear? Does that make sense?
Hopefully. I think so.
Yeah. Do you feel a sense of a different type of support with this?
Yes. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, for my back feels like more supported for sure. I think I'm feeling now, interestingly, a little more weight on my sits bones than I did like a second ago when I wasn't using the back of the chair.
Cool. So your structural weight is maybe resting more into your sitting bones versus if you are moving a little more actively over the sitting bones, you might notice a different type of distribution, right? There's no right or wrong here. This is the beauty of this, is that you have these options. So when you're seated at home and you're working, that finding the support of the base of your structure in these sitting bones can come from coming forward on your chair and feeling like, oh, I can move around, or you can walk those back, right, and roll up the back of your chair and actually find a lot of support. That way you may feel a more sense of weight, right, structural resting. All of that is totally valid. It's just something to play with and see if that might reduce a little bit of that tension in the low back. Let's equate this to music playing, right? So as a bassoon player, you have to use your breath, obviously, right? So do you feel like you want to come a little more forward on the chair to play, like in order to hold the instrument? How do you usually orient?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, I'll obviously have to try it in a second to see how this, with this sort of the way I'm sitting now. But generally saying, I have been using the back of the chair when playing for years now. So I'm not one of those people who feel that they need to sit at the edge of the chair and like be like that, like all taut in order to play. So obviously this will be a little different than what I'm used to, but it's not like completely not what I'm used to.
Okay, awesome. Well, let's experiment then. Let's if you don't mind playing a little bit, you can either play a short phrase or a little bit of a scale, whatever feels comfortable. Let's see how this feels for music making. And for those watching, just to notice your own sitting bones as Daniel notices his in this process, and see how that might affect your experience listening and taking in the sound. Great. What do you notice, Daniel? How was that?
Well, what sort of meta noticed is that as I was playing, my concentration and my sort of body sense moved towards the instrument and away from where my back and body is oriented. So really what I noticed was that I'm not really noticing, but they're sort of my brain to a different place.
Yeah, that's wonderful noticing. That's awesome. The fact that you noticed that you weren't noticing, right, is awesome. Now let's experiment with that. That's great, Daniel. Let's go a little slower. So what I like to say is that we're going to slow down our thinking, which can feel like we're moving really slow. But in fact, we're just letting ourselves be more aware, right? So it feels like time might be slowing down, but it doesn't mean that our tempo necessarily has to slow down. Okay, so let's slow down for now. We're going to slowly invite to bring your instrument to playing position. But you're going to do it not in your quick normal speed, just a little slower, so that you notice as the instrument, the mouthpiece is coming to you, that you have sitting bones underneath the base of your torso. And before you play, see if your awareness can really register the points of those sitting bones that we all together just discovered. And maybe you might even give yourself a little rocking motion over the rockers of the sitting bones, just to kind of say hello to that part of your structure. And now let that awareness launch you into playing the phrase. You don't have to hold on to it either. Just let that be your instigator for sound. Beautiful. What did you notice, Daniel?
That I was able to keep on awareness of my body as I was playing, though I wasn't able to determine the effects on what came out of the instrument. So I don't know if it sounded the same or different or better or worse. I wasn't able to sort of concentrate on that. But I was able to sort of keep on feeling my sits bones and be aware of like my movement forward and back as I was playing and the movement of my fingers.
Awesome. And what did that offer you? Like, what's useful about that? Being kind of having some sense of your body as you play, even if you didn't catch the sound quality at that point.
Well, I mean, presumably over time, that it's something that can develop to understanding and more control over the body and sort of realization, like what's a better thing to do and what's less good, like less optimal, and the effects of those things, presumably, again, with more over time and like realize also connecting to the sound bit, right? Of like what comes out. I'm sure there's some effect. I'm just wasn't able to catch it at the time, but maybe over an experimentation that something can develop, being able to be perceived both at the same time.
Absolutely. What you're speaking to is this kind of sense of whole body coordination, right? And that your instrument and the playing of your instrument isn't just happening where your fingers meet, the fingering, and where your mouth meets the mouthpiece, right? That the actual playing of your whole instrument is with your whole body instrument, right? That there's some cool coordination and partnership there between your physical structure and the instrument. Can I ask anyone, Tony, Brock, or Devin, did you notice or have any experience watching Daniel, or did you notice a difference between the two as an observer?
Definitely. I think it's just a smoother phrase, and it seemed like the music was just connected and brought to life. And it's even through the kind of pixelated picture, I can tell and hear.
Yeah, I'd agree. I could definitely hear you sounded definitely better on the second time. Much more smoother, much more better phrasing. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, I noticed a difference in how I'm actually listening now that I'm sitting up straight, I feel way more engaged. Even over the internet, it's tough, but it's like I'm more present.
Oh, cool, Tony. So can you talk a little more about that? Like, did you feel that just a little awareness of your sitting bones kind of opened a door to feeling more sensory? Or were you really present with Daniel's process? Like, what can you speak a little more about this idea of listening?
I don't know. I mean, it's hard to explain. I guess I mean, I don't have good posture at all. And I'm going through some chiropractor stuff right now, trying to correct that, trying to align it. But just by having these sitting bones, you know, being aware of them, it's already kind of shaped my torso so that I'm upright now, which I'm always hunched over. And so just going through the process with Daniel as he was playing, like trying to align myself and trying to imagine myself slowly picking up my instrument as well, kind of mimicking, you know, what he was doing. I just had a better awareness of where he was going with the music.
Wow, that is awesome, Tony. I love that. So I know we don't have a lot of time here, and we could probably spend hours on this content. I'd like to invite you, actually, Tony, to, if you'd like, to try out this and with your instrument, and Brock, if you'd like to as well, and Daniel, if you want to keep playing with this idea. Let's all bring our instruments up, but in this case, I'll have Daniel and Brock mute themselves so that they can play along, but we won't get all the sound feedback. And musicians, we practice a lot, right? So we're used to repetition. So think of this as a little bit of a repetition, right, for our nervous system, or we're just practicing an awareness of a part of our body that exists, that's a supportive part of us. And I like to think of it as, instead of repeating, trying to make the same thing happen, I like to think of it as renewing, right? So, or reminding, right? So I'm going to remind myself of my sitting bones in this moment instead of trying to recreate how I felt in a previous moment. Does that make sense? So you're just going to remember your sitting bones are there, and they may feel different moment to moment, day to day. Okay? So Tony, let's do this little experiment with you where you're feeling the sitting bones. You might invite yourself to come into a little movement. You might rock on the rockers of the sitting bones just a little bit. And while you're in orchestra, you know, you could, any player can do just a little baby version of this, just to invite movement. This also invites movement in our hip joint, which is useful because our joints want to have that movability that actually really influences our sound. It influences our breathing as well. So now the other piece to this is, and we have our rockers beneath us, is Tony really slowing down your thinking here and really staying with awareness of your rockers as you bring your instrument to playing position. So going at noticing speed, which feels a little slower than usual. Nice. Great. And play from this condition, let your rockers launch you into the phrase.
Wow, this is weird.
Not abnormal for it to feel weird.
Wow. It's like giving this weird sensation to the rest of my body. And it's like making me shake a little bit. It's kind of strange. It's like too much to think about all at once.
That's okay. I would say it's a different type of thinking, right? So we're allowing ourselves to sense, right? So sensing our body instrument, it challenges our habitual way. And it's so funny because when I work with a musician, they'll have a totally memorized piece, right? So for instance, I was working with a violinist once. We did something very simple like we're doing now, where we just noticed something about where we feel support, for instance, like the sits bones. And the whole phrase that they had memorized and played a million times completely left their memory for like a few moments. They were like, what? I just, like the muscle memory wasn't there because a new synapse was building. Right. So that's where we want to allow a little bit of permission for it to feel a little sloppy and a little strange. Right. Because then we're just building a little bit of a new neural pathway for something different to happen. Okay. So just want to say that your experience is totally normal. Right. Like, oh, this is so strange. Right. It can feel very interesting. So maybe right now, Tony, go to what is really, really normal way for you to play. And this isn't about being good or bad. This is simply about how it is that we're utilizing our body instrument, right?
Yeah. Wow. I'm realizing how much I contort my body to be normal. So that's strange.
We all do this, right?
Yeah.
You're all of us here and all the people watching.
It's like I'm winding up and putting myself in.
Cool. What do you notice about that? Aside from, I like this idea of noticing this winding. That's pretty cool to notice. How did that feel? Was that pretty normal?
Yeah, that's about how I normally feel or normally situate myself.
Great. So now let's do the same thing, and we're going to feel a little bit of sitting bones. And just remember, your sitting bones are attached to a whole body. So take a moment that as you have bringing your trumpet up, right, to you, before you play, just kind of be in relationship here in almost playing position, right? Like you have the mouthpiece close to you.
Mm-hmm.
So you're feeling ready. Yeah. Now, here is where you're going to notice your sitting bones, and then just remember that they're attached to your whole body. You have a whole spine coming out from your pelvis. You have the back of your head. Yeah. And your whole body is going to take the inhale, not anatomically, but we're just going to think that right now. And let that actually start your sound. Wow, cool. What did you notice?
There was more freeness to the sound, clearer attack to the sound. It kind of did what I wanted it to do. And like even in a situation like this, even though I'm not performing live, I mean, this is live, but even just having people listen creates anxiety.
Totally. It does.
And I felt like when I was a little bit more involved with the breathing, that kind of disappeared, and it became more about just me and the instrument.
Wow, that's so awesome. Brock, Daniel, Devin, did you hear a difference and have an experience of something you noticed?
Yeah, and it made me realize, like, when Tony brought up kind of the anxiety idea, like, I feel like no matter how many performances you do, you're always nervous. There's always, like, when you're waiting to go on stage, there's always an anxiety, and that's kind of in your head. But when you go to your body, like pick a point, like your sits bones, it's like you get in the moment, you get in the reality, in the not in the future, in the past, and in the moment. There's only the present. So there is no, because anxiety is all about what's going to happen in the future.
I love that. It's such a presence, right? Sorry, Brock, I think I cut you off there.
Oh, that's okay. I just definitely could hear more presence in his playing in the second time, and it definitely was coming together a little more. So it was, yeah, definitely a difference for better.
Yeah, and I love how this. So yes, Tony, I will say this first, that the sound was so much more free, with a lot of cool, I think, overtones in it. And I want to say, like, speak to this idea of being better, because as musicians, and perhaps those of you at home who aren't musicians but can relate to this, that we often feel like we always have to improve ourselves. And while there's value in that, I'm not discrediting that at all. I like this idea that being better, or that getting more of the result you want, is really through a sort of freedom within yourself and your movement, right? You actually do less to get more, right? So you don't have to work extra hard to try to be better. It's more that you're kind of relaxing into yourself and into, again, the trueness of your structure, which is already supporting us. And from that place is actually where things improve, so to speak, right? In this type of work, we don't really think of it so much like, oh, you're bad now and that you need to improve to get better, right? We think of it as, oh, you already have what you need. It's just a matter of accessing it, right? And Tony, that was such a beautiful example of that. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And Brock, let's do a very brief phrase. I know we're here at the end of class. I'd love for you to be able to experience this and share with us here. So I'll invite you to have a moment of feeling your sitting bones, since this is our theme for the day. And for all of you at home, you can do this same thing. If you work, we're all on our computers a lot, right? So this is a great thing to play with when you're seated at your computer. You want to offer yourself a little movement on those rockers. And then, like Tony, we're going to add a little awareness that those rockers are moving a whole structure, right? We have a whole body attached to that. So Brock, go ahead and experiment a little with playing something, phrase or a scale.
I have to remember to.
It's okay. What do you notice about that? How was that?
Yeah, it was weird to think about my body and the music at the same time. So I kind of going, oh, that's what they were.
Right, that's what I'm talking about with that. The muscle memory can kind of change a little, right? So then sometimes it's a little disorienting for a few moments, right?
Yeah, and I kind of felt myself coming back to my habits as I played more.
That's fine. That's fine. Yeah. So let's do that now, because we have some new information that's kind of coming in. Let's go back to do your most normal. Just to play a few notes. It doesn't have to even be that long. Just go into what feels very normal. Great. Great. And what do you notice about that now that you've sort of been playing with some new information? What does your habit tell you?
I'm not entirely sure. It felt comfortable. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Cool. It felt comfortable. That's great.
Yeah.
And habits are comfortable because they serve us, right? They're useful. Yeah. And we often think about bad habits, right? Because, we think, oh, I have bad posture. Now, there's maybe a good reason why we have that type of posture that we can honor. And then we may just not want to keep making that same choice. We may find that, oh, I'm actually working really hard when I don't need to work hard, right? So we want to be compassionate to our habits. And I'm not saying right now that you're working extra hard, but I just mean that all of us, this is typically how we as humans function, right? So we want to be compassionate to our habits and then willing to try something new, right? Because if we're, again, it's that improvement idea. If we perceive ourselves as not good in the first place, then that's another layer of tension, right? That brings us back to this mind psychophysical relationship. So without it needing to be any particular way, let's experiment one more time, Brock, with, again, just feeling your sitting bones. Yeah. And for you, I'm going to invite you to notice a little bit of the space behind you, maybe the back of your skull, maybe even just awareness of the room behind you. Just take that in for a moment, and everyone else can do this as well, where you're just going to sense and feel the space behind you. It's sort of like a spatial awareness. And computers really pull our attention in, right? So here's a moment where we actually give ourselves a little spaciousness. It's just a moment. We don't even have to maintain this. Yeah, nice. So as you bring your bow around, right, to playing position, see if as your bow goes forward that you're sensing something behind you in opposition, almost like you have an invisible arm doing the opposite thing behind you. Yeah, beautiful. Now, with a little awareness of your sitting bones, just giving yourself a little supportive movement. It's like a micro movement underneath your torso. What if that awareness started your phrase? Wow. Cool. What was that like, Brock?
It felt like it was more on top of what I was playing. Like, wasn't trying to fight with it, more just let it happen. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. What else did you all hear? I see
I
Daniel.
want to say it looked like it looked like Brock playing that last phrase was like the easiest thing anybody's ever done in their life. Like,
Nice.
Yeah, there was a certain richness to the sound that wasn't there the first time.
Yeah, it sounded deeper.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it was so connected, right? And how did it feel within you, Brock? Like, how did your quality of you feel as you did that experiment?
I just felt more calm and connected with what I was doing. I didn't feel, I don't know, it just, yeah, I guess I wasn't worried about what I was doing either. I just did it, which was nice.
Awesome. This comes back to this idea that less is more, right? We're interfering with ourselves a little bit less.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you all for joining me in this exploration. I loved seeing you kind of all show up in different ways and present different material that's true to you. And I feel like this is an important time where we just feeling a little bit of ease within ourselves, whether it's how we move and how we are, is useful, right, in the time of a pandemic. And also as artists, right, this type of quality, this is just a little taste, right, of what this work offers. When we start to feel into the quality that we have available to us, we have such a wide range of ability to express in a really authentic way, right, where we're not so much interfering. Devin, do you want to speak to how this is relevant kind of to the orchestra? You know, like how anything that you feel is interesting to the whole, right, to the gathering of music.
well, I think it's amazing just that you guys have all demonstrated in just a very short time, because a lot of times when we learn new concepts or with a teacher, it's always like, well, it takes 30 days to form a new habit, or it's going to take 6 months. Or it's amazing to me how quickly just the idea, it's not even instrumental technique, but it's just the idea of noticing a simple thing like your sits bones can change so much, can have such a drastic change. And for me, it's like, as a conductor, I can't remember what teacher told me this, but when you're on rehearsing or performing, more rehearsing, I find it's hard to think about these things. It's hard to remember because you're doing the thing and you just get in your habit. And one of the things that I would do is I would put sticky notes in every page of the score if there was something I was trying to remember, because you can't literally remember it unless it's staring you in the face because you're so focused on the music. So I mean, I guess that's something that I would be curious about, as everybody who's here and probably everybody who's watching is also spending so much time at the computer. It's one thing to say for me to sit down at the computer and say, okay, feel my sits bones. Oh, that's great. But then a minute later, I'm here, and that's like this quarantine, I probably have more back pain than I usually have, than I have conducting. So yeah, I think I'd be curious about. I'm fascinated how the lessons that you're teaching us, and that I've seen you teach orchestras, and that will help musicians to not only have less pain, but to make a better sound to convey the intentions of what they're trying to create, or the composer's intentions, but also as just people sitting at their computer, which all of us are doing right now. So I would be curious, maybe as a final thought or question, and how everybody listening can just kind of continue to remind themselves in like 3-hour spurts sometimes when people are sitting at the computer.
Yeah, that's brilliant, Devin. Thank you for bringing that up. Basically, that's like, how do I apply this work now to my life, right? I had this moment, right, this experience. And that's, again, where this repetition comes in, but I like to think of it as a reminder, as a refreshing. And it's not something we have to micromanage, but it's almost like a befriending, I would say. Like befriending your sitting bones, so that as you befriend them, like you're just noticing they're there throughout the day. And maybe you do have to do little reminders for that. Sometimes I tell my students that every time they wash their hands, that's where they remember their sitting bones, right? So that it just becomes second nature, because it already is second nature, right? We're already built this way. Our nervous system already knows what to do. So I like to think of it as befriending that part of you, so that when you go to play, you're aware that that is there supporting you. And then say you're going to move over your sitting bones, as we all have done in these experiments today. That's where you give yourself, it's a moment, right? It's an extended moment. We slow down to notice, and then we give ourselves that moment of a little bit of movement, and then we let it go. Then we play the phrase. We don't have to keep thinking about it. It's already there. If we keep thinking about it, then we're trying to keep our sitting bones the whole time, and then that adds all this extra tension. So again, it's almost like it's a little wake up. You're just knocking on the door of your nervous system, and then it answers the door. It knows what to do. So I invite you all, as you're practicing, as you're playing, those of you sitting at home at your computers, just allow yourself to befriend your sitting bones. And if you're befriending something, you're just getting to know them. You're just remembering that they're there to support you, or you're allowing yourself to receive their support. And that can happen in little moments throughout your day. And if you don't remember, that's okay too. Maybe you remember once in the day, and that's okay. Does that kind of give you all clarity around how you might practice and take this forward?
Definitely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here with me, and thank you to all you guys watching. I hope this is interesting, and keep hanging in there and enjoy the summer as best we can as we move through these interesting times all together.
Well, thank you, Brock, Daniel, and Tony, for joining us. And thank you, Molly, for giving us some really important things to think about, just in terms of our body's three-dimensionality that we don't think about a lot, and for giving us permission to be sloppy as well. I hope that people, and please comment below, and if you were intrigued by what you saw, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. I just wanted to thank Molly for joining us, for sharing her work with the Alexander technique for this week's MusicConnects, because this is a very musical practice and field, and anybody who's creating music, or as Tony said, listening to music, or just experiencing life, I feel I personally have benefited tremendously by this work. I don't know how I would be even standing today without it. Just thank you, Molly, for joining us. And next week, on this continuous every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. MusicConnects series with the Arapahoe Philharmonic, we actually will have Tony Zader, who many of you just saw. He's going to do a private concert, which is going to be really fantastic, and we're going to do a little interview and just get behind the music. So please mark your calendars for that. And just a reminder that for all the musical, and as you've seen, physical and educational things, with all these health benefits that the Arapahoe Philharmonic is able to put on at this time, we couldn't do it without your support. We are in the midst of our spring fundraising campaign, which ends at the end of June, and we're doing really well. We're about 4/5 to our goal. So please consider making a donation. Any donation is going to help us to bring music, to connect our community as we've been doing, and we will continue to do. And so thank you so much for your support. And again, thank you, everyone. And I've really enjoyed this class. And thanks, Molly, and everyone for joining us again.
Thanks, Molly.
Thank you.
Thank you.